In Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah, amma ba'd. On behalf of my Muslim family, I would like to welcome you all to our live Q&A session with a scholar and counselor. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. As you know by now, my Muslim family is a platform, your platform, by which we work towards empowering Muslim families to be loving, strong, focus on the hereafter, and be high achieving. And with that goal in mind, we've put together a unique platform where we've brought together 20 of some of the leading Islamic scholars, teachers in the English speaking language, and we brought them onto this one platform where they have designed specifically tailored content in the shape of courses, in the shape of video series, to empower you towards the vision that we've set. And inshallah, alongside that, we also are running these weekly sessions where you can ask questions directly via either email, via social media, and later also via telephone as well. So alhamdulillah, we've had 2 sessions so far, and we had many questions coming through. And it is my very good pleasure to have with us today, once again, Sister Rahma Abdul-Lateef, who is a qualified counselor and very experienced in this area. Sister Rahma, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for having me.
Wa yak. How are you today, sister?
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. How are you?
Yes, alhamdulillah, very well. Very well, alhamdulillah. We've
Alhamdulillah.
been getting a lot of questions since the first session we did.
No.
And it was real insight for us, I think. I don't know how you found the first session. Might be interesting if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, but I found it very insightful in terms of the issues in the community.
Yes. I think it's the way the questions came and the questions that the issues that we're all facing is really just doesn't make it any different from who we are. We're all living, we're all facing the challenges. So yeah, it just gives us that insight of where we are at.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Definitely, it does. It's a real window into the issues that we're facing right now, and there are some recurrent themes which you'll pick up on today, I'm sure, as we
Okay.
go through the questions. So, without any further delay, we'll start the questions, and I'll read them out one by one,
No.
inshallah. I'll read them slowly. If you want
Okay.
me to repeat anything, just let me know, and
I will do.
inshallah, we'll take it from there. Okay, so the first question for today, here it is. My husband wants to marry a second wife, and he agreed when he married me that he wouldn't do it. I feel that he doesn't value me, and death would be easier for me than to be a co-wife. He said he only wants to take a second wife to be happier and more complete. That is the question.
Okay. So there's a few elements in there, I think. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. I think the question sounds a bit loaded. We don't know where the sister is, but we generally know that in Islam, people are allowed, the husband is allowed to have more than one wife. And it sounds like this husband wants to exercise that right. So I think it sounds to me like the problem is not the idea that he wants to take the second wife. The way I'm understanding the question is that it's the promise he made that sounds to be problematic. He said he would not take another wife, and now he wants to take another wife. And so the sister then is saying that she doesn't feel, does she not feel appreciated? Did I get that right in the question?
She said she doesn't feel valued.
Okay, she doesn't feel.
Basically, yeah.
And I think it becomes a bit problematic when we start to think about these kinds of matters from a very dunyawi perspective. The idea of marrying more than one wife, we only need to take a Quranic worldview. in starting to think about the idea that it's not so much about whether you as a wife is valued or not valued. It's so much the idea of rukhsa, the idea of permission, that the brothers are permitted, and if they fulfill the rules, which I'm not going to go through, I think it is down to their own yani wanting to go down that route. Now, if you feel that by staying when he takes a second wife, and my answer might be a bit controversial, but I think the idea of marriage and being married for us as Muslims is the fulfillment of our worship, the fulfillment of our half of our worship, half of our deen. And if staying in that marriage is going to become a fitna for your worship, a fitna, a difficulty, a test for your that will interfere with your relationship with Allah, in the way that you start to think about yourself and the way you will be with the husband. If it's going to interfere, it is something to talk about and come to an agreement of whether you stay or whether you don't. And I think that might sound a little bit of a difficult challenge. But the whole idea of marriage is worship, to fulfill your worship, to be able to worship Allah in the way and fulfill your purpose, the purpose that we're here for. So if you stay and feel unappreciated, we now start to think about different emotions that will come up and take over and stray you away from the path that you need to be on. So it is a challenge. It is a challenge. But maybe you need to talk about it a little bit more and understand a little bit more. But I don't think it's about valuing or not valuing. That is if you are looking at it outside of the Quranic worldview. The Quranic worldview is very different from the everyday worldview, because we have the ideas of he doesn't value me anymore, he doesn't think I'm good enough, he doesn't. I don't know if it's about that, and the brother you might want to have a conversation with your husband to get a little bit more of an insight, a little bit more of an understanding, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But I would say talk and talk more about it. And inshallah, make dua. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide you both to what is best for both of you for your worship. But talking and talking more is what I would suggest at this point, inshallah. And Allah knows best.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. I mean, looking at that question, it seems that the sister feels that the husband reneged on a kind of a promise. Now, obviously, we understand that in Islam, the marriage contract can stipulate certain things. So, as I understand, the prospective wife can put in there, she doesn't want that, taking a second wife. But obviously, but if that's not been done, then was it a promise? Was it an idea? I guess there's something to think about for people, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the issue here is that yes, women normally can stipulate that in the contract. And I think the stipulation doesn't say, you can't say, I will not allow you to take another wife. The stipulation normally would be, if you take another wife, I won't be able to do it. And so if he does, then that means she has to sort of go. She will have to go. But she can't, you can't say you are not allowed. I think that's very important to clarify, because the permission is not with the sisters. The permission is already been granted. But I think the issue here is that the brother promised. Now, what we don't know whether that was contractual or was it just verbal. And so he's going back on his words. And I think that's the challenge for the sister, that you promised me something and now you're not keeping your promise.
Yeah. It seems that may well be the issue. And as you've said, it's really about communication and more communication to iron this up, because obviously people may think a certain way, and thinking evolves as well. So, what might be perceived as a promise may not be. Maybe it was. We don't know. But
No.
I think something to really think about and consider for everyone, really, I think, as a marital thing of where people are at.
I think it
Okay.
becomes
Yeah.
it becomes such a challenge
Mm,
for when we sign up to the idea of this monogamy, ideas of just one.
mm,
But actually, when we think about even communities and societies that sign up to saying, I'll only have one wife, there is always stories that we read, stories we hear, stories we see, that sometimes there's a possibility that then they take on someone else quietly
mm.
on the side. So I think the idea is that the idea of only one is an idea, but in the true sense of the word, there's people who might require to have more than one. And I think when Islam allows it, it's very much to safeguard the women more than anything.
Yeah.
Instead of being kept on the side, you're
Mm.
official, you're known, and therefore your rights are sort of met and fulfilled. I think that's really the most important thing, and mainly it's safeguarding women.
Yes, for sure, and I guess safeguarding society as well, by
Yes.
extension,
Yeah.
from other kind of social ills. But um, we pray that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala makes it easy for the couple,
Amen, Ya
and
Rabbi.
makes it
But
easy for them to carry on. I mean,
inshallah, but the most important thing for now is talking,
mm,
and
mm,
talking more. And when the temperature starts to get high, stop, do something else,
mm.
come back to it. Just find a way of talking and talking more, and the brother to bring the sister along, not just to sort of go off and say I don't care, and the sister not to say go off. I think it's talking. They need to be talking and more talking.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very good, and important and timely advice. Talking, communication. So, Jazakallah khair for that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to our next question, inshallah.
Yeah.
Right, so the question is as follows. I avoided haram relationships and wanted to marry the same type of person. I found out my wife had a past after she was diagnosed with an STD. She then admitted to a past life. I don't know what to do. And that's the question.
Read the first part again.
Yeah. So the question is I avoided haram relationships and wanted to marry the same type of person.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think the way I'm understanding the question is that actually when the marriage happened, the
Yeah.
person is not the same. Yani there is a difference in the
There
background.
is, yeah, and he's discovered that she has an STD, and that she's admitted to having a past life, um, so to speak, and he doesn't know what to do now, basically. So, yeah,
I yeah, I'm not sure what the question really is, because
mm,
the idea is that they're now married. The wife has a past, but we're calling it the past. It's not something that is happening now.
yeah,
I don't know if there is anything that it's very much about what he wants to do, whether
yeah,
he wants to carry on with the relationship and put the past in the past and be in the present and carry on, or if he can't do it, then it's a decision that he has to make. I don't know if there's anything here, because we are not saying that she is in another relationship in addition to being in a relationship with him.
Well, from the question, it seems it is very much in the past,
Yes.
and it seems a case that he's confused. It was important to him, as it would be to any practicing Muslim,
Mm.
avoiding haram relationships. Now, I guess there's the personal aspect of not knowing what to do, or feeling maybe a bit, um, almost, um, lied to, or maybe, or deceived. But then there's a religious aspect. Obviously, what should one do? It might be good to tackle from that angle potentially. Obviously, we understand the past is the past, but how should someone maybe deal with this?
See, I think that becomes a challenge in many different ways, because there's a lot of conversations around this idea of past. So I attended the tafsir of Surah Nur, for example.
Yes.
And there's so many conversations that came out of that class around someone's past. And the sheikh actually was saying, if someone asks you if you've done this before, don't answer the question. And that is in the premarital conversation, because that's the past. So I think this brother found out because the sister had this issue. There's something that Yani showed itself up. Had it not shown itself up, it's not a conversation. So on
it seems to be the case.
On a personal level, it might be very difficult. We know psychologically some people can't, especially if they preserved themselves and they wanted to wait and they were expecting their wife to be doing the same, to have done the same thing. So it could be very difficult for him that he can't do it, he can't be in that relationship, he won't feel able to fulfill maybe his and her physical rights and things like that. So when it gets to that point, then you have to really ask yourself a question. Is this a relationship to carry on with? Because the whole idea is to find peace and tranquility in that relationship. But I don't know if from a religious perspective, something that happened in the past, whether if it didn't disclose itself, whether it's really something to be disclosed. And if it isn't, then it's the past. It's something that happened. And it's just maybe people finding a way of having a conversation to confirm that this is something that is not current, it's not happening now. Because I think the Islamic ruling is when something is happening now. That's where there's guidelines of what to do. But I don't know if there's guidelines for something that happened in the past. So in the past, thinking about it as something that happened in the past is very much on a very personal level. And that will be very difficult. Because some people can say, okay, it was the past, let it go. I don't know if I can, I don't want you to do this. And they put in some structures to help them build trust. Because in a couple relationship, trust is very important. If he doesn't feel the trust and he's starting to have the idea of thinking, where are you going? Who did you meet? That becomes very difficult to stay in that relationship. But if he can find space to say, okay, it happened in the past, it's not happening now, and these are the mechanisms I want to put in place to make me feel able to have confidence and trust that this is something that was only in the past. And if he can't do it on a very personal level, then it is his right to decide what he wants to do next, I think. Because if it's on a personal level, it's very difficult. And it's one of the biggest challenges in couple work when we do couple therapy. When there is no trust, when people feel betrayed, it makes the relationship very, very difficult to be a relationship that then allows you to worship Allah, because even through the relationship we are worshiping Allah. And then we have the challenge there of lack of trust. Lack of trust is a big deal in a couple relationship. So I would suggest to the brother to just have a few conversations with the sister to make sure that, yes, this is truly was in the past and it remains in the past. And if he wants to put some mechanisms in place to help him to feel able to trust her and to believe that it was in the past, then that is something they can negotiate. Wallahu ta'ala alam. But if it's becoming a big problem, you can seek help, you can speak to a sheikh, you can speak to a therapist. There are so many different ways of doing this, inshallah, to make it work. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Jazakallah khair. I think you've obviously covered it from both angles, the religious aspect, from what we understand, and obviously the personal aspect, which might even be very strong in terms of the emotion and everything else. And as your trust is very important to sustain and then maintain a relationship. So there are avenues. And last week we had Sheikh Shakur, and obviously we have the Islamic Council of Europe. They also offer other services as well, in terms of mediation as well, etc. So if anyone wants, they can check them out. The website is I'll mention it at the end. Actually, I don't have it to hand.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
If he doesn't work on his, if it is interfering with his trust and disappointment in the sister, that could interfere with that relationship in a big way, because it's a very personal thing, and if that's the case, then sometimes speaking to a therapist or someone helps a little bit. But if personally it is something he doesn't feel able to do, then he can't, because it's just a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah. It's something that you can't really get beyond, but I guess it's something they'll have to work out and work through, maybe together or individually. We'll have to see. But I hope that answers your question, inshallah. So we'll move to the third question for today. Right. So the question is, it's quite short.
Okay.
My teenage daughter recently confessed she has been in a lesbian relationship, and now she is confused. How should I approach this matter?
Say that again.
My teenage daughter recently confessed she has been in a lesbian relationship, and now she is confused. How should I approach this matter?
So the question is, the daughter said to the mother that she was in a relationship with a woman, another woman.
Yes, correct.
Is
Yes.
it historical or is it still current?
This we don't know.
Yeah.
This we don't know.
So
She
it
has
becomes
been.
it becomes a bit of a challenge. Yeah, the way it sounds, has been, sounds like it's
Yes.
the past.
Yes, and she's now confused. So it's
Yeah.
like
So
something that she has had one, but now she's now confused.
so we needed a little bit more of clarity in the question. What is creating the confusion? Is it because she was in the same-sex relationship? Is it because she doesn't want to be in the relationship but she's in the relationship? Is it because she wants to consider now a male-female relationship and that's why she's confused? We don't know what the confusion is about.
Yeah.
So it becomes a bit difficult to respond, I think. So inshallah, if the questioner is listening, inshallah, maybe they can give us a little bit more and we can tackle it the next time.
Inshallah, we can ask a bit more clarity on that. Inshallah, that's fine.
But I think all in all,
Okay.
if the confusion is what is right, I think we are now living in a world where truth is questionable. We are living in a world that with the ideas of constructionism. Yani we co-construct our own meanings, we make up our own meanings, we make up our own rights and wrongs, and it's what you want and what makes you happy and what you desire. That's the sort of the type of space that a lot of these young people are growing up in. But I think if you're a Muslim, we know that we are guided by whatever we do is something that is stipulated in the Quran or in the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ said it, we do it. The Quran says we do it, we do it. And everything that the Prophet ﷺ did himself is also something that is already stipulated in the Quran. So there's no confusion in that area as far as we are concerned from the Quran and the Sunnah. We are, I think the position is women marry men. And so it's very clear. But what we are not clear about is what is her confusion.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's. I mean, I'll go to the next question. There's something similar, and maybe
Okay.
there could be some general advice as well.
Mm.
So, next question is as follows. My husband was a very strict father. My son started rebelling in his teens.
Mm.
He is now 20, and over time, he went from cross-dressing to homosexual to transgender. He has now also renounced Islam. He has moved out, but it pains me whenever I talk to him. How should my relationship be with him? So this is obviously from the mother.
So the mother is saying that the father was quite strict.
Yes, yes. He
And
was very
am
strict,
I
yeah.
hearing that, am I hearing that correctly, that the strictness might have pushed him away? Is that what they suggest, the question is
Yeah,
suggesting?
the implication is that because of the strictness that may have contributed, because he's saying my son started rebelling in his teens.
Mm.
He's now 20. So he's gone from cross-dressing, homosexuality to transgender, and now he's apostated and moved out of the home. So she seems to see a link between the strictness and between the rebelliousness in his teens.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's her own assessment, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah.
so I think in human functionality, the way we understand it, we understand that human beings develop in phases. So when he starts to rebel in his teens, I think we call that a transitioning point. When young people are transitioning, and remember, your context is very important. Where children grow up, their context, their environment, all those things really contribute to who they become as they're becoming. Rebelling, teenagers rebelling here in the where we live is quite normal and almost a rite of passage.
Mm.
So I don't know if we can put that down to anything, even if at home family parents are quite relaxed and very yani permission giving, and they're very, so young people can still do things that the parents are saying, telling them not to do. So there's that point of transition. When they're transitioning, they become quite difficult. There is a whole history of the ideas of teens and teenagers, and this is something that we know in history, that it was introduced.
Mm.
Historically, people used to be referred to as young women and young men. So you were a baby, you became a toddler, you were a child, and when you are transitioning from a child, you transitioned to a young adult, historically. But at some point after the World War II, I think, the idea of a teenager was born. Actually, whatever I'm saying is there, it's in literature, it's in the history. I'm not making this up. And I
Yeah.
didn't study this as part of my Islamic studies. I studied this as part of my. So I think it's important to say that, because sometimes people think, well, that is Islamic. Or that's not Islamic. This is just a history, that the idea of teens was introduced. And when you look at the history of it, why was it introduced? It's very much to do with the idea of capitalism. The young people were given their whole new space to be in. They were given their whole new culture to be in. The teen culture, parents don't, yani the children, and they are no longer children. Now they've suspended them from being adults, so they're in a space of their own. Parents don't understand that space. Parents can't enter that space. So it's a very, very difficult space for children to be in. One of the things that I do, when I am running my parenting groups, I help people to really decide and make a choice of whether they want to call their children teenagers or whether they want to call their children young adults. There's a difference. Psychologically, it completely sets that young person in a different space. depending on where you position them. What we know also, when they're in this world of a teenage person, a young person, the only contact and connection they tend to have with their parents is the parents becomes the bank. They just make that connection and contact because they need something. But the relationship itself normally gets a little bit off, because of the fact that the world that they're in, it's their own culture, they have their own language, they have their own dress code, they have the. So I just thought I'll take this opportunity to share that a little bit. In how do you see your child transitioning into? Are they transitioning into a teenager or into a young adult? Now, the history that we had here, that they used to refer to people as young women and young men, it's also a history we have in Islam. That when we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ and the young people who were around him, they were children and they were young adults who then had responsibilities. Not quite as fully as grown-ups, because they don't have the responsibility that their parents have, but they become responsible. So transitioning from an Islamic perspective, from a childhood into adulthood, is very different from transitioning in from our environmental and our social aspect. So that then becomes such a challenge for parents. In where do you go and how do you do what you need to do? How do you get your children to do what you want them to do? It becomes such a big challenge. One of the things that maybe you might want to think about is, how are you helping your child to transition? Are they transitioning into a young adult or a teenager? The idea of the fact that this young man has left Islam, I think, again, that is also an idea. Did he denounce it? Then we have guidelines of maybe the sister, the mother might want to have a conversation with him, to meet up with a sheikh, maybe someone of knowledge, to have a conversation with him. Because sometimes, from my experience as a therapist, what I know, when I work with a lot of young people, they tell me, I don't want to be a Muslim. But in reality, what they're saying is they don't want to do all the things that Islam wants them to do. So it's helping this mother, maybe might want to get a sheikh or someone to have a conversation with Hassan in establishing that. Is he saying he doesn't want Islam because of the path that he's on? Because he can work on coming back away, he can work on working away from where he's at, and maybe with time, inshallah, he will come back. Because sometimes when they say I don't want it, it's not because they don't want the Islam itself, but it's a way of shutting everybody up and pushing everybody back. Don't put me under pressure. I don't want to do the things you want me to do. I'm not a Muslim. But sometimes it's not always. I've worked with young people who have said, I told that to my parents, or I said that, but it's because I felt the pressure of. So it's important to have someone to have a conversation with him, and to help him think about where he's at and the possibilities, inshallah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put ease in this matter for you and your family. Ya Rabbi.
Jazakallah khair. I mean, it's interesting you talked about the childhood, because I actually studied history at university, and we actually did talk about this, how childhood was a relatively recent development in terms of teenagers. It didn't actually exist. So it's a novel kind of concept. So you're 100% right on that. And I guess it does present challenges where people went into kind of childhood being young people with responsibilities, or almost now it's expected that they're going to hit this strange period of being a teenager where they're expected to be a little bit moody, troublesome as they begin to transition, and it even carries on into late teens, early
Yes.
20s when they're at university.
Yeah.
So there's this sense, and it's kind of strange that the more advanced people have become in terms of knowledge, there's so much knowledge and information out there. In terms of people's personal development, they're actually a lot less lacking to take on responsibility. And it's a challenge, I guess, also for generations to deal with, because the previous generation took on a lot more responsibility a lot younger.
Yeah.
But we have to obviously work with the challenges of society that we're in.
Yeah.
And what the peers are going through. So yes, I think, and again, I think maybe boys develop a little later than girls as well.
All that is socialization, though. All that is socialization. It's how we
Yeah.
are socializing our children. It's how we are making them. And, you know, it's the idea of, in your mind, psychologically, what your beliefs are is how they play out in your action. So when you believe that I'm a teenager, then the next question is, what do teenagers do?
Yeah.
When you go to university, I know for sure, I've got colleagues who have talked about this idea of university culturally is not just about studying. It's also about experiencing, and it's experiential. It's doing all those things that you were never able to do at home. You move away and you go to university, and then the university puts on so many different things and so many different activities. So you're there, you are young, you're just experiencing. It's an experiential time. So that's the socialization of it. Now, for you as a parent, you have to begin to think about what your values are and how are you going to support your young person into being a young adult in university in the world of a completely different alien system that doesn't fit in adulthood, but it also doesn't fit in childhood. So that's the challenge.
Yeah. It certainly is a challenge. May Allah SWT make it easy for everyone.
Ameen, Ya Rab.
At this age, I mean. Alhamdulillah, we've got quite an international audience today. We've got people tuning in from Pakistan, India, Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, and various other places. We'll take one question from the comment section. This is from Pakistan. It's from Faiza Noshin, and she says, Assalamu alaikum. How can I motivate my teenager to do hifz? He says it's not fard, and if he forgets, he will be sinning, and he doesn't want to do that. How should I answer him?
MashaAllah. Again, the question there is my teenage. See, there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is something that I have a personal thing about. Is what, before I answer, she's not here, but if I was sitting with this mom, the first question I would ask is, how do you want your child to be? Are they a teenager or are they a young adult? Depending on how old they are. Because when you position them as a teenager, it's not cool to memorize the Quran. And I'm not saying this because I think it. I know it for sure. And it's not just because of we're here in the West, for example, this child is in Pakistan. I have been to different countries where you would say majority of the people are Muslims, but the young people don't want to memorize Quran because in the culture of a teenager, it's not cool. So maybe changing that idea of he's not a teenager, he's a young person, he's transitioning into a young adult. And yes, he's right. He's saying that memorizing the Quran is not fun. But I think if you want your son to memorize the Quran, there are so many different ways. He's already a teenager. What has been happening since he was younger? Because normally people introduce the children to starting to memorization earlier, so that to avoid this kind of challenge. But the other way would be to have a conversation with him. First of all, why do you want him to memorize the Quran for you as a mom?
The sister actually is commenting live, and she
Oh,
said,
is she?
yes, you are absolutely right. So she might respond if you have any further kind of questions you raise. I thought I'd just let you know.
Okay. Yes, I've seen it at the bottom. Okay, so I don't know what she's agreeing to there. What is right? But I'm just thinking, what is it that you want your child? Why do you want him to memorize the Quran? That is something you want to talk with him about. Okay, it was a dream. How did you begin to build that dream? When did you start to build that dream? If he's already a teen now, it becomes a challenge. How old was he when you started? Did he start and is he dropping off now? And sometimes our dreams as parents are not our children's dreams. So you might love it for him to do this, but he doesn't want to. So you could end up negotiating with him to say, okay, if you don't want to memorize, attend a Quran class. If he attends a Quran class and they're helping him to learn the Quran and understanding it, and the purpose of it is to apply in his life, that might be helpful to him. If he doesn't want to do hifd, one of the things that you want to avoid is to make it such a big deal that you fall out. So you want to negotiate, you want to sweet talk him into it. And if he's learning the meaning of Quran, alhamdulillah, that's brilliant. That's very, very important. It doesn't mean that memorization isn't, but if he's starting to develop the relationship with the Quran and he's learning it and he's starting to understand the meaning, and your dua is very powerful. As long as you keep making dua to Allah, he might, because it was your dream, you want it, you are taking him to the mosque to do to learn the Quran and the meaning. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide him to that. But the challenge for you is not to turn it into such a big deal that he refuses to do what he is already agreeing to do now. That's very important, I think. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. And may He fulfill your dream, inshallah.
Jazakallah
Okay.
khair. So I think the sister is
Okay,
responding to
she's
it as
still,
well.
yeah, she's
Yes.
just saying there he's 14. But when he says it's not foul, he's right, so I shouldn't push him. No, I think push him to pray. Yes, that's completely important. Now, about the memorization, you can sweet talk him. You can habib him, and you can, be sweet with him and say it will be lovely, and you can maybe help him to find to understand and learn the I'm looking for the English word, the daraja, the level that one attains with Allah when they memorize the Quran. But if he doesn't want to and he's learning the Quran and the meaning and he's praying, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, you're doing a good job, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. But yes, exactly, not to push, but talking and talking nicely and being kind with him and encouraging and not forcing, because he's now 14 and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Jazakallah khair. So if there are any questions, please put them through. We've got another question that was asked beforehand, and I'll read it out. Right, it is as follows. I spoke to my cousin, and in the conversation, we were talking about the Messenger ﷺ. He said he believed the Prophet ﷺ was a genius, but not a messenger. I tried to explain the evidence to him. However, he wouldn't accept them. This then takes him out of the fold of Islam, as I understand. He has recently got married, but I'm sure his wife doesn't know he holds these beliefs. Ignorance is bliss, but what should I do now that I know about his state of Iman? So that's the question.
I think again, for us as human beings and sometimes for us as Muslims, sometimes emotions, we're very emotional beings. So the way we work as human beings is this idea of astaghfirullah, and he's gone out of the fold of Islam, and oh my God, because we get into the emotional aspect of things. But I think Islam is so beautiful and so robust in the sense that it just doesn't kick people out. So if this person's views are those views, it just might be that he needs to have further conversations and be allowed to explore his views with someone who maybe is not very much a relative. Because when we are starting to think about having those very difficult conversations with families in our families, sometimes those things become a bit difficult. If you are younger, they don't respect you, or if they have a view about you. Yani, it is sometimes difficult within family to resolve something as big as this is a philosophical question. This is a question related to his belief, his aqidah. Maybe if he had an opportunity to speak with someone who is, inshallah, learned, but not yourself, you could try to facilitate that, putting them through or finding a very good. There's a lot of good clips out there that are actually showing proof of the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You could get something like that, or put him in contact with. The idea of saying that throws him out of the fold of Islam. Let's not be too quick to throw people out. Give them the benefit of the doubt. He needs to learn. He needs to be helped. When he gets to speak to the person who is maybe more learned than yourself, and he completely does not agree, then that person will be a better person who will be better placed to make a decision of where he stands. But I think sometimes we can be quite emotional about things, because it's normal. We want people to just say, yes, I believe. And I think it becomes very difficult for us to hear somebody asking questions. But you see, the Quran is so beautiful in so many different ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that allowance. And he preserved stories like when Ibrahim alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how do you give life and death? And that story in the Quran. And there are so many similar stories where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has demonstrated or showing us how people asked questions around Iman, and maybe they're struggling, and sometimes maybe it doesn't make sense for them. They want to understand a bit more. So let's give this brother that benefit of the doubt and connect him with someone who is knowledgeable, and let them have the conversation, inshallah, and make dua for him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Jazakallah khair. So we've got another question online. I think this will be the final question.
Okay.
This is from Beenish Sabir. And the
Mhm.
question is, any advice for a person whose spouse is not on the same page in terms of raising children? If one takes the matters of deen so lightly, but other wants to instill Islamic principles, children see that both parents have different priorities and rules, and obviously they will be more inclined to one who takes religion on back seat and other as rigid and restrictive. It's also on the screen. So yeah,
So
over to you.
any advice for a person whose spouse is not on the same page in terms of raising children? If one takes the matters of the deen so lightly, but the other wants to instill Islamic principles, children see that both parents have different priorities and rules, and obviously will be more inclined to the one who takes religion on the back seat and the other one than the other one who is rigid and restrictive. This is a very, very good question. And I don't know if we have enough time, but we'll inshallah touch it. It is really such a challenge, because when we are thinking about marriage and marrying, we normally think about you're choosing, and we start from the place of choosing. You're choosing the mother of your children, or you're choosing the father of your children. And I think sometimes people don't ask the right questions at that time before they move forward. That's one of the challenges we see in our work, where we are seeing a difference in how parents want to raise their children. And that creates such a conflict in the family, and it also becomes a conflict for the children. So it's a big deal. I don't know if there is a light advice here. And if it is mom who is laid back, it's really a challenge for the dad, because fathers normally will be working more. Even if mothers are working, mothers are more actively involved. So in a workplace, you will see, this whole idea that women go to work and we go to work and we have to work. But when a child has an accident at school, or when a child is ill, normally the mothers are the ones who get called, or they're the ones who will take time out to go and pick the children up. So we know for sure that mothers do more and they have more connection with the children than fathers, generally speaking. I'm sure there will be an exception somewhere where fathers have more contact or equal contact. So the idea here then would be for mom and dad to have some very good mom and dad conversations. So there is something that happens here. We have a parent relationship and we have a couple relationship. So couple relationship is husband and wife, and the parent relationship is your parents to your children. So in the parent relationship area, this is where you really want to be able to agree on what your goals are. What are your aims? What do you want where do you see your children in 5 years' time? Both of you. Is she on the same page as you as far as the matters of worship for you as adults are concerned, and not on the same page with you in the matters of raising the children from an Islamic perspective? That would be the first question to explore. The second question would be, what is it that she is laid back about that you want to enforce, or you want her to focus on? So you have to be completely clear, and it's very difficult for you, the one who is wanting to instill Islam and Islamic values, because again, you become emotional. So you have to find a way that you have these conversations and you avoid getting heated up, emotionally charged up. And if it gets heated up or charged up, you just call the conversation off and come back to it. But it's the idea of getting that clarity. What is it that you want? And what is it that their mother is not wanting? And for what reason does she not want that? But before you get there, you need, in your couple relationship as adults, are you on the same page as far as your own commitment to Islam is? And is it only in the parental segment that you have disagreements? That's very important for us to separate the two things, because sometimes in the couple relationship there is also a conflict, and then we sometimes find that conflict seeping into the parenting relationship. So I hope, inshallah, those are enough pointers for you. I'm giving you 2 at least to start with. If it gets heated, come back to it at a time when it's not heated. But again, my idea would be talk and talk and talk more. And there is then another thing, maybe inshallah the next time I come back we can talk a little bit about it. There's this idea of so many couples that we see coming through the door for therapy. There is the idea that we have a problem in communication. So we need to understand a little bit, how do you communicate? What does talking look like? And how do you hear the other? Because sometimes when you want to just hold your point of view as the point of view you want to push forward, then we hear the idea that we have problem with communication, you don't understand me, you don't listen to me. But you need to find an equilibrium position where you're both contributing to those decisions and where you want to see the children, as in your parental relationship. But are you on the same page in your couple relationship? Wallahu ta'ala alam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put ease in this matter for you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help your wife to be able to meet you on the same page, to inculcate Islamic values in your children from a very young age, because that will make it easy for them when they're actually tackling life and in general, inshallah. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Jazakallah khair for that, Sister Rahma. Alhamdulillah, I think that brings us to close of our live Q&A session. There was one comment I just wanted to read out. It's from Sister Afia Mak. She says, Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, I attended so many parenting online courses and webinar with you, Sis Rahma. Jazakallah khair. So,
Barakallahu feek. Jazakillahu khairan for you who attended, because that is such a high, such a high degree of concern and commitment that people will actually go and attend a class in just wanting to learn, how do I raise my children, and how do I raise them in the way that will be helpful to them in knowing and connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Zakillahu khairan, sister. There is a question here. I don't know if it's a question. It says, what a punishment for a man divorce a pious, faithful wife only because she gave birth to girl's child. Did you see that?
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. So I think, yeah.
Should we keep it for the next time, inshallah? I know we ran out of time.
Yeah, I think we keep for next time. We've got a lot of other questions as well, but because of time, we're not able to go through them all. So I think to do it justice, we'll ask it next week. But Jazakallah khair, Sister Rahma, for your time. Appreciate it very much. And to all our viewers, Jazakallah khair for tuning in. And you can find out more about My Muslim Family at www.mymuslimfamily.com. We have a lot of questions. We wanted to get through everything. So we are quite inundated. So we will promise to get through some other questions that have been asked from previous weeks. Inshallah. I think by next week we'll be on top of everything, inshallah. So Jazakallah khair. And on behalf of My Muslim Family, I'd like to welcome you all and say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.